So anyway, here's that. You are to pick up 2 items in the back when you came in today. Okay, one is kind of thin, one is kind of thick. No computers, Gracie. That means you, Mitchell. You don't need any of that stuff. Okay. The first thing I want to look. Oh, do take out a highlighter though. All right. So the first thing I want to look at is the actual assignment sheet. Okay. And if you didn't pick it up, they're on the yellow table back there. Okay. So, Research Essay 2021. Okay, so, just to kind of, give you the quick and dirty version here, and then we'll get into specifics. So, y'all have been researching a topic, and you have already created your annotated bibliography on this topic, which, by the way, I'm grading, though I don't think I've started on this class yet, okay? So, don't go check your score yet. Give me a little bit of time. But you've already spent a good bit of time on what is ultimately going to become this paper, okay? So you were inspired to research that topic from what's called a primary source. So right now, under minimum requirements, in the third bullet, it says primary source. Make a little note to the side because maybe you don't know what a primary source is. But a primary source is the first thing you looked at. And in this case, that is either Huck Finn or Civil Disobedience or Wallen. So you might want to make a note that yes, you're going to be using that primary source in this paper as well. And it makes sense because primary generally means first. And then the secondary sources, which you see, I want to say, did I not put secondary source? Oh yeah, actually it's ahead of it. The secondary sources, make a note, those are the articles that you fit into the annotated bibliography. So that's where you read what other people had to say about the primary source or about the topic that you were interested in that was inspired by your primary source. Okay? Yeah, what you got?
So if we're doing the protest,
yes.
Would be the primary source?
The primary source would be Civil Disobedience. Okay? Secondary sources are the articles that you read and analyzed about civil disobedience or what you may think is not really considered civil disobedience because maybe they're not like nonviolent, the protests that have been happening in America, in the last year. Does that make sense? Okay. So you're going to take your research, guys, and you are going to essentially decide your take on it. So, for instance, if you looked at Huckleberry Finn and whether or not it should be required reading, some folks chose to look at the controversy of this novel, right? You're going to sit on one side or the other of the issue. And that is going to be essentially your claim. So maybe you believe that Huckleberry Finn needs to be taught in schools even though the language is harsh because it tells an important part of our history. Or maybe your claim is going to be that Huckleberry Finn should not be required reading because though it's a historical and important novel, it is just too hurtful to some readers. Okay? But you're going to sit on one side or the other, and that essentially is your claim. Now, if you're doing something like civil disobedience, and you're looking, for instance, at the protests that have been happening recently, my guess is that you're going to want to determine if what has been happening in America recently is actually civil disobedience, because, again, Thoreau said that civil disobedience is peaceful protest, right? And not all of these protests have been peaceful. Okay? A step further, you might say that you might ask yourself, is it an effective means of protest? Okay? Has it been effective? And why or why not? Yeah.
Okay, so I think I get it, but when we do this one, we're not having to related to Huckleberry Finn. We're just
So hold that thought, and we'll tell you how I want you to do that in a moment. Okay? All right. So let's see. If you looked at social media, I had a lot of kids that looked at social media and its effect on young people. Okay? That ties to Walden, because in Walden, Thoreau said, a good life, a happy life is the simple life. And y'all, social media, though convenient, well, I don't know about social media. I mean, obviously having a little computer in your back pocket is convenient, right? But if you're looking specifically at social media, has it made life more simple? You could argue it's made things more complicated, and you could even argue that it has had negative effects on people your age. For instance, think about cyberbullying. I mean, like when I grew up, I don't know, I think I was probably more the bully than the bullied, to be honest. But when I grew up, say I had a bully, I could leave that at school, right? I didn't have to deal with that at home. If someone has an issue with that today, it's like 24/7, because people can get to you when you pick up that phone and take a look at comments and stuff, right? So you want to try to find one side or other of the issue, okay? And that's going to be your overall claim in the paper. Now notice, how many secondary sources am I requiring for the paper? 5. How many were you required to write about in the annotated bib? 6. So you can drop a source. You can drop a source that may not be as good. You can keep it if you want, but you can drop it. And y'all, you can definitely add research. Like maybe you don't have enough and you need to see what some other folks have had to say. Okay? All right. So this is big points, guys. Big points. 300. So some of y'all are like, I just don't think I want to do this. But, if you don't, you're probably going to have a real hard time, passing. So I wouldn't just skip it, okay? All right, let's see. So the nuts and bolts are up top. Any of you guys who are in dual enrollment, I would take a picture of this heading right now so you have it in 2 places, because tech requires a specific and different heading. And this is one of the 2 papers that's going to tech to justify your grade. Okay? So Mitchell and whoever else, Leanne, I think you're one of those folks, right? Y'all take a picture of it so you know what your heading's going to look like, and you don't have to find this sheet when you're typing up your paper. All right, to kind of look at the format for the essay. So your introduction is going to have an opening quote. It can be a quote from the primary source. It can be about the primary source. It could be just about the topic in general. That's your choice, okay? Going into the introduction, here's what Christian was asking. How do I tie it in? Well, you're going to talk about the primary source and how it inspired the research. So what was your topic? Christian, remind me.
Civil disobedience.
Okay, so, and what did your research end up, bringing up?
Basically, protests.
Okay, good. So you're looking at, today's times. You might even be looking at things like cancel culture. I've had a lot of people who've been interested in cancel culture, and I am concerned about that too, because as a teacher, there are texts that I know are important, like I read in Megan Woodard's annotated bibliography. I had no idea, y'all, that the Little House on the Prairie books that I read when I was little have been banned from a lot of school systems because evidently, and I don't remember this, but evidently the language is really derogatory towards Native Americans. Okay? That's not something I noticed as a kid. Now, if I picked it up and read it today, I would be more sensitive to that. But I grew up in the 1970s, folks, and that was not, that was not really something that was an issue to me as this little white girl, right? But it's kind of like taking that out of the historical, I don't know, what we call the canon, the works that we tend to look at. So I got mixed feelings about that, to be honest with you. It worries me a bit I don't know if I like this whole erasing history thing, but let's see, what else? So what you would do, Christian, is you would give a little bit of background to civil disobedience. Civil disobedience, written by Henry David Thoreau, because he, opposed the Mexican War and the rounding up of, runaway slaves. Then go into the date, and you give a little background on civil disobedience itself, but then you start to bring in like how it's viewed or seen or apparent in today's time, okay? And so it says, let's see, first introduction, discussion of primary source, setting, author, relevant background, how it led you to your topic, okay? And then your thesis and the claim. Now, it gets more specific when you get to the outline. Okay, so if y'all can look at the outline real quick. Okay, Gracie. If you can go to the outline, it says background on your primary source, couple of sentences. Social, cultural context of the primary source. That's going to be the mid-1800s, pre-Civil War, Thoreau getting, thrown into jail, whatnot. And then how it leads to your thoughts on it today. Okay? So the outline is pretty prescriptive. And by that I mean I've given you really what I think is going to work in the order that you would put it. So follow my advice here, and I think you'll be okay. All right, when it comes to the body paragraphs, make a note out to the side. Each body paragraph must cite at least one outside source or secondary source, but it can cite more than one. Okay? So each body paragraph has to at least, quote or paraphrase one of those articles, one of those ideas from the articles, but it can also bring in other people's ideas as well. Now, you got 4 to 5 of those bad boys, which means your paper is going to be about 4 or 5 pages long, double spaced, okay? Your outline, you can either write it on the copy I gave you today. I thought that would be helpful to print out for you. Or you might use this as a guide to type up an outline. And then your first draft would take that document and convert it into your essay. Does that make sense? I don't mind either way. But if you're going to type up the outline, you're going to print it and you're going to have it for me not this Thursday, but next Thursday. So next Thursday, you will bring your hard copy outline to me to check. Now, here's the thing. I was going to have this due Friday this week. Then I realized y'all don't have class Friday this week. So then I was like, okay, I'll make them do it by Thursday. But then I realized we're finishing Our Town, and you've got an in-class essay on Wednesday on Our Town. So I thought that's just too much. So I bumped this a little bit, but some of y'all who are going on these sweet vacays over winter break that I can't afford to take, but that's another story, right? If you going skiing or doing something really cool and fun over winter break, then I'd get this done before you go out of town so you don't have it hanging over your head. Okay? So that's there for you to work on. When you get back, and I'm looking at your outline on that day, I will also have a hard copy, and I'll probably upload it. I know I'll upload one for Canvas too, but I will give you a sample of one of these papers that worked really well last year. So I think the samples, do they help y'all? I know, I think they would help me if I were in your shoes. Nicole?
Okay, so when you say topic, like in the form of a question.
Yeah, topic.
Like civil disobedience and like the protest, would you ask, like, do the protests like coincide with?
Yeah, are the protests that are happening in today's time right now, and you don't have to write it that long, but are they actually civil disobedience according to Thoreau? And then you might even ask, are they effective? I mean, and the answer to those might be different, you know what I mean?
Both?
Yeah, you could use both. I mean, and the answer might be different. You might say, well, technically, some of these have broken down into violence, so they're not really civil disobedience yet. they have been effective in that finally we have some voices that are being heard, and there are some, changes that are occurring because of these voices, okay? So you don't necessarily have to answer yes or no to both questions. Does that make sense? Well, you ponder on that, okay? You ponder on that. All right, yeah, Cassidy, what you got?
What are y'all doing next Thursday? I won't be here.
Well, aside from me looking at this, which is going to be big, I will have that hard copy of that sample paper out for you. And then probably talking about Whitman finally, because Friday of last week, I had you guys look at the bio on Walt Whitman and read those 2 poems. So if you haven't done that yet, yes, you need to go back and do that, okay? So I imagine I'll finally be getting to him. I might get to start on him a little bit this Thursday. It just kind of depends. Okay? All right. That's about as far ahead as I can look right now. I'm a little bit of a fly by the seat of my pants kind of gal, and Canvas has forced me into